I am not a financial advisor. I am a conspiracy theorist. I came to these conclusions by myself while I was doing research for other things, as in researching Epstein, researching Bill Gates, researching the digital currency initiative, studying stuff like the Harvard Institute simulation called Currency Wars. Gary Gensler sits on that. It was like looking into companies like XRP that I came to these conclusions. I am not a financial advisor. Everything I say you should take to your own discretion and research even your own things. But I am largely making this video to move forward with a clear conscience, knowing that I made an effort into letting people know that our current financial infrastructure is being upgraded and it's implementing itself into various other technologies. And this is just my way of telling people you should look into these things, because the dollar will not be what you think it is anymore. The current iteration of the dollar as we know it now will not be the same moving forward after a lot of these technologies have fully implemented themselves into our legacy systems. So everything I say will require a lot of understanding of like things, stuff like the petrodollar. Why do they call the dollar the petrodollar? How is it used in international trading? Why is it used as a medium for value across the board with stocks, with the exchange of commodities, markets, etc., etc.? Comes down to understanding how money moves in the banking system, how our current banking system is responsible for how the Federal Reserve works with its bonds. It requires a lot of knowledge of that stuff. So, okay, for anyone watching this on YouTube, I know I said this was going to be, the last one was going to be my last upload, but this video isn't just to be used on YouTube. I plan on using this on everything. On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. This is a message that I want to be reached out to everyone that I've ever spoken to, because I feel like certain things need to be addressed. And just because I want to have a clear conscience moving ahead and thinking that, I did my part. I told everybody, like, because if things work out the way I think they work out, I'm going to go MIA. So this is going to be very difficult for you to believe, because the current narrative would have you believe that cryptocurrencies are a tool for the deep state. In reality, it's just a tool. How you use it and how it's used is what largely is largely what they don't want you to understand. It's largely why they've uneducated us. It's largely why they've destroyed our everything here in this country. So say what you will about whatever opinions you have about the New World Order and how the agenda of cryptocurrencies fits in. But if you want to criticize it and you hold either Bitcoin or Ethereum and you point at XRP and you call it a banker's coin, I want you to understand the lead project head who's spearheading the digital currency initiative, who works for the MIT Media Group, who was hired by Joy Ito, who was ousted for having dealings with Epstein and another certain philanthropist that claims that he's doing anything for humanitarian good, is kind of a joke, but that's beyond the point. This is a current pivotal moment. The petrodollar will fall. You don't know what that is, you're kind of lagging behind the game, but who cares? At this point, leverage yourself with any cryptocurrency. Anything. Realistically, anything. If you want to get into wanting to be along the standards of something that has utility and something that will be used, get anything that is ISO 20022 compliant. Anything that relates to those tokens or coins, whatever you want to call them, will work out to your benefit. Remember, our current fiat system and fractional banking system is about to fall. All of it no longer works. It is now being replaced by a new system, a new set of infrastructure. When they talk about the reset, when they talk about building back better, this is what they're talking about. They're setting railways for new sets of infrastructure, for new sets of legislation, for new sets of regulation. And it all relates to the tokenization of physical assets into a new system. Largely, our banking system as it is now is outdated. This is their move for moving everything from one way to another way. But remember, the baseline asset for these blockchains is what will be valuable. These companies and these corporations do not have the research nor development side figured out enough for them to build their own thing. They're largely depending on foundations creating forks for these companies and these banks and these institutions in order for them to be onboarded onto blockchain. That is why Chainlink is kind of unironically the one that everyone's going to, because it's an oracle system. It translates data into blockchain data. That's all it does. So realistically, it has a position in the future because it's solving a real world problem, which is turning whatever data set that we are inputting, right? A document, a deed, a land deed, a loan, et cetera, needs to be translated to blockchain information so that it could go on the public ledger. And the reason why that makes sense is because you can mask it, and then it becomes somewhat anonymous to who it specifically relates to. But at the same time, it's also something. It's also an input in the ledger that you can account for, especially if you have the receipts. So I largely believe that this new initiation into this new frontier was planning on being stopped. And don't get me wrong, there are various factions in this. All of these big players in the financial technology sector are trying to hedge their bets and win in this industry. And largely, not just one of them will be in charge of handling all of this, because that would be, you would create a point of failure, and if there is ever a hack, a lot of problems can be caused. So segmenting this new set of infrastructure is kind of a must. There is currently, for better lack of words, there is a current upgrade into infrastructure that is, and that's the implementation of certain cryptocurrencies into our legacy system. And with this sort of integration, right, there has to be an upgrade on the receiving side of the financial structure, the banking sectors, trading and lending companies, exchange markets, et cetera, right? There's this whole new thing about tokenization of assets, which means representing the physical in digital. I mean, there needs to be a sense of regulation, there needs to be laws. So it's a drawn out process. And that's the process that we're currently in, is the middle ground of figuring out how this gets implemented into the new world. It's the same way with how email was integrated into everyday life. It will eventually happen to this in terms of a custodial sense of assets that are digital tokens. It's like carrying around your paperwork, but digital. So moving on to that set of infrastructure is kind of new. It's kind of like, ooh, and people are still kind of like afraid of it because there is no sense of regulation. Have an asset, have something that will, net you a profit in a sense that makes you valuable as a person. So in this case, a chainsaw, right? If you have anything that, if you have the skill set to take down trees, that's going to be a net benefit moving forward, because in a weird way, our financial system is about to fall. And a lot of it has to do with the Swift banking system. And the Swift banking system, people will say it's a messaging platform between banks, but it's a legacy system. This was developed back in the early 80s, late 70s, and it is far outdated. It's susceptible to hacking, and it's unreliable to send money to certain locations in the world, because there's no exchange between bank A to bank B that will be willing to leverage the money lent to allow that, right? It basically needs an upgrade. But with the upgrade of the Swift system, it's far different than you think. The Swift system was primarily used by banks and bank charters. So if you weren't, or if you didn't have access to one of these portals, by that I mean like a web account or the computer system that communicates with the other computer systems. If you didn't have access to that, it's because you didn't have the licenses, you weren't insured enough, blah, blah, blah. There were barriers of entry. Now with the way cryptocurrency has developed, it basically gives you that same ability to move something of value over the internet for someone else to get, and they have a variety of exchanges that they can exchange this asset for a dollar or for whatever currency they're working with. Because that's a very new idea, people aren't aware of the value of that. People don't understand that America has largely been leveraging its position on the SWIFT system and the way money moves in order to kind of squeeze certain positions out of countries. They give certain loans, they do certain things that will leverage these countries in bad positions. I can't even name one of the more famous ones that's currently going on with India, but it's just the way things work. And with this new upgrade of cryptocurrencies, at this point, I don't know what to tell most people to what to get. 20022 compliant. Any of those are great. I really consider it's going to have a future because everyone working on that project is, how should I say, it looks like these people have clearance from the DoD to very oomph levels that it's kind of weird. Especially when they've hired previous lawyers from the SEC, when they've hired previous employees from the Federal Reserve. It gets kind of woo woo when you look at what's going on. That's the way I think things are moving on. Has there been any of these events that would lead to anybody thinking that we were going with digital representations of things? I would largely look into the Singapore FinTech Festival by FinTech Financial Technology, Singapore 2018. I think that's a very good thing to look at because if Event 201 was anything to learn from, I would highly suggest watching that and Currency Wars by the Harvard Institute. Um, you should quickly gather that we will be abandoning the dollar soon enough. Um, the current iteration of the dollar. The dollar will always exist.